A spring break trip to paradise ends in a haunting mystery. On March 6, 2025, 20-year-old Sudiksha Konanki vanished from a beach in Punta Cana. No witnesses, no body, just a trail of unanswered questions. What really happened that night? Sudiksha Konanki was just 20 years old, a pre-med student at the University of Pittsburgh. Originally from South Riding, Virginia, Sudiksha was known for her sharp mind, kind heart, and unwavering ambition. She had always dreamed of becoming a doctor, motivated by a desire to help those in need. She was loved by her family, friends, and professors, someone whose bright future seemed limitless. At just 5 feet 4 inches and with a warm smile, Sudiksha was the type of person who lit up any room she entered. She loved life and had a curious spirit that led her to embrace every new opportunity with enthusiasm. A natural leader, she was constantly pushing herself to excel academically, while also making time for her friends and family. Her parents, immigrants from India, were incredibly proud of her accomplishments. They had watched their daughter flourish into someone capable of achieving anything she set her mind to. But it was her love for exploration, her sense of adventure, that ultimately brought her to the sunny shores of the Dominican Republic for a spring break trip in March 2025. Last known sighting. On March 6, 2025, Sudiksha was last seen at the Rio Republica resort in Punta Cana, Dominican Republic. It was supposed to be a fun, carefree getaway, a break from the pressures of college life before final exams. Sudiksha traveled to the island with 5 close friends from her university, eager to soak up the sun and make unforgettable memories. Little did anyone know, this trip would end in one of the most mysterious disappearances in recent memory. The morning started like any other, with the friends enjoying breakfast before heading to the beach. By the evening, the group had gathered at the hotel bar, where they spent hours chatting and laughing. As the night wore on, Sudiksha, like many students on spring break, let go of her worries and enjoyed the freedom that only this kind of trip could bring. Her laughter and her energy seemed to radiate, making it clear she was having the time of her life. However, by the early hours of March 6th, things took a dark turn. Around 3 a.m., Sudiksha left the hotel bar with 5 other women and 2 men, including 22-year-old Joshua Ribe, a fellow student from Iowa. The group made their way to the beach, the sound of waves crashing against the shore mixing with their excited chatter. They walked down the path from the hotel and toward the water's edge. The night was cool, the sky lit with the faintest glow from the stars above. It was the kind of moment that felt timeless, but this tranquil scene would soon become the setting for a haunting mystery. At first, the beach was quiet, with no sign of anything unusual. Sudiksha and Joshua Ribe walked together, chatting as they strolled along the shoreline. But as they neared the water, the waves began to rise. Joshua later reported that they were both caught in a strong undertow, swept out into the ocean by a powerful wave. Both struggled to stay afloat, but Sudiksha, according to Joshua, became separated from him in the chaos of the water. Joshua claimed he tried to reach her, but the strong currents made it nearly impossible. After what felt like an eternity, Joshua managed to pull himself out of the ocean and onto the shore. He was disoriented, exhausted from the struggle, but believed Sudiksha had somehow made it back to land on her own. It was early on the morning of March 6, 2025, when the friends of Sudiksha Konanki began to realize something was wrong. After days of fun, laughter, and carefree joy, the trip had turned into something entirely different. The previous evening had been spent with drinks, music, and the kind of bonding that only spring break could provide. Sudiksha, a 20-year-old pre-med student with dreams of helping others, was with a group of her close friends from the University of Pittsburgh. They were staying at the luxurious Rio Republica resort in Punta Cana, Dominican Republic, enjoying some time away from the rigors of schoolwork. There was no way to predict that this serene getaway would soon turn into one of the most perplexing disappearances of the year. As the hours passed and the night grew late, Sudiksha and her friends made their way to the beach. The warm ocean breeze and the soft sounds of the waves crashing against the shore set the perfect backdrop for a relaxing night. Sudiksha, full of energy and laughter, had no reason to suspect that this night would end in chaos. Around 3 a.m., Sudiksha was seen leaving the hotel bar with 5 other women and 2 men. The group walked along the beach, their footsteps leaving faint impressions in the soft sand. At first, it was just another stroll under the stars, part of the typical spring break routine. But as the group neared the shoreline, Sudiksha found herself walking alongside one of her fellow students, 22-year-old Joshua Rai. The two had struck up a conversation earlier in the evening, and now they were walking together. According to Joshua, they talked for a while, enjoying the quiet of the early morning. He claimed that they were both swept into the ocean by a large wave. At first, the water felt refreshing, but as the wave grew larger, they struggled to stay afloat. Joshua later recounted that after being tossed around by the waves, he tried desperately to reach Sudiksha, who had somehow become separated from him. He said he was overwhelmed by the ocean, swallowing salt water and gasping for air. When he finally managed to reach the shore, he was disoriented and exhausted. He believed Sudiksha had somehow made it back to the beach on her own, but Sudiksha was nowhere to be found. As Joshua stumbled to safety, he found himself alone on the beach. Confused and unable to explain what had just happened, he eventually found a beach chair and fell asleep, still thinking Sudiksha was safe. Hours passed, and it wasn't until 8:55 a.m. that Joshua finally made his way back to the resort. His friends were eager to hear about the night's events, but when Sudiksha didn't show up, the first inklings of worry began to set in. The realization that she was missing began to sink in. Calls were made, and the search began. Back at the resort, Sudiksha's belongings, her sandals and a beach bag, were found on a nearby beach chair. But there was no sign of her. No footprints in the sand leading away from the chair. No indication of where she could have gone. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. The resort staff and security cameras showed Joshua walking alone, but there was no footage of Sudiksha. The search that followed, involving resort staff, police, and volunteers, turned up nothing. No one could explain where she had gone or what had happened after the wave had pulled her under. The authorities quickly launched a massive search operation. They scoured the nearby beaches, combed the ocean, and even conducted air searches for any sign of Sudiksha. But despite the extensive efforts, nothing was found. Joshua was detained by the police for questioning. His account of the events the only lead they had. He was asked about his actions, about what happened after they were separated in the water. While Joshua was questioned extensively, he was ultimately released, and the authorities began to look for other clues. But no one was sure what to believe. Was Sudiksha swept away by the waves and lost to the ocean? Or was something far more sinister at play? The lack of physical evidence, the absence of witnesses, and the oddity of the entire situation left investigators grasping for answers. The hours turned into days, and the investigation began to unravel more questions than answers. Family members arrived at the resort, frantic with worry, hoping for any shred of information that would bring their daughter home. But the search continued to come up empty. Sudiksha had vanished without a trace, and the only certainty was the confusion that surrounded her disappearance. Her family, meanwhile, had no idea what to think. Sudiksha was an ambitious student, full of promise and life. Her sudden disappearance made no sense to anyone who knew her. What could have happened on that beach in the dead of night? Why had she not returned to her friends? Was there something Joshua wasn't telling the authorities? Investigators were left with nothing more than theories. Was it an accident, a tragic misfortune caused by the waves that night? Or was there something more? Some believed Joshua's story, and some didn't. Some questioned whether there was a deeper mystery, but nothing could prove or disprove any theory at that moment. The beach had witnessed a crime, or perhaps just an accident, but the ocean's secrets were refusing to give them up. As the days turned to weeks, Sudiksha's disappearance became a topic of online discussion, with theories and speculations flooding the internet. Social media forums were alive with debates about Joshua's story and whether or not he could be hiding something. Could he have been involved in something far darker? Or was he just a victim of the waves? the ocean swallowing him whole? It was clear that no one had the answers. The investigation moved forward, but as time passed, the likelihood of finding Sudiksha grew smaller. But just as hope began to wane, another twist emerged. A local hiker discovered Sudiksha's sandal washed up on a remote part of the coast, a place no one had thought to search. Could it be a clue? Or was it just another piece of the puzzle? A sign that Sudiksha had gone into the ocean, but there was still no sign of her body. The search continued, but with each passing day, it became increasingly uncertain whether the truth would ever be uncovered. And with that uncertainty, the mystery of Sudiksha Konanki's disappearance remained unsolved. After Sudiksha Konanki's disappearance, the investigation into her whereabouts became a complicated web of conflicting stories, theories, and unanswered questions. The search continued, but the further authorities dug, the more uncertain everything seemed. With few clues, no reliable witnesses, and an incomplete timeline of events, the case quickly became one of the most baffling and tragic mysteries of the year. Sudiksha's story raised more questions than answers. Was she a victim of a terrible accident, swept away by the waves? Or was there something darker at play? Theories ranged from tragic misfortune to more sinister possibilities, and each new lead only seemed to muddy the waters further. 1. The ocean theory. A tragic accident. The first and most obvious theory was the possibility of an accidental drowning. Sudiksha had been caught in the powerful waves of the ocean early in the morning, and it was entirely possible that she had been dragged out by the current and drowned. Joshua Ribe, who had been with her, seemed convinced of this. His version of events painted a picture of two young people caught off guard by the ocean's strength. The water, a beautiful but unpredictable force, could have easily taken Sudiksha, with no one the wiser. But the ocean had its own secrets. While authorities and volunteers searched the nearby beaches and scoured the ocean for any signs of Sudiksha, nothing surfaced. No body, no sign of struggle, no footprints along the shore. This made the drowning theory seem less plausible. A tragic accident, yes, but where was the evidence to support it? The absence of physical evidence was puzzling. If Sudiksha had drowned, why hadn't her body washed up on the shore? Even a body caught in the undertow typically finds its way back to the coast. Yet there were no clues in the water, and the beach had been thoroughly searched. Authorities began to question if this was an accident at all. 2. The foul play theory. A darker possibility. As the days passed, investigators began to entertain the possibility that Sudiksha's disappearance was not the result of an accident, but rather the result of foul play. This theory gained momentum after they started looking into Joshua Ribe's actions and his inconsistent statements. Joshua was the last person to see Sudiksha alive, and he was quickly interviewed by local authorities. His account of events, however, raised more suspicion than clarity. His story, while consistent in some ways, had gaps, contradictions, and odd details that did not align with the evidence. For example, why had he gone to sleep on the beach after the struggle with the waves? Why hadn't he immediately gone back to the hotel to alert others? Moreover, the fact that there were no other eyewitnesses to confirm his version of events left many feeling uneasy. If Joshua had been involved in any way, it could explain the lack of signs of Sudiksha on the beach. Had she been taken somewhere else after the waves had separated them? Had something happened between them that led to a darker outcome? With no solid evidence of drowning and the timeline growing murkier, the suspicion of foul play began to build. Investigators pored over Joshua's background and any connections that might explain a motive, but they came up empty. Still, the possibility that something more sinister had occurred remained at the forefront of the investigation. 3. The missing timeline. What happened between 3 a.m. and 8 a.m.? One of the most troubling aspects of the investigation was the complete lack of clarity about the events that transpired between 3 a.m. and 8 a.m. During that window of time, Sudiksha was last seen with Joshua, and yet, there were no records or witnesses to confirm what happened next. The resort security footage showed Joshua walking alone, but there was no sign of Sudiksha in any of the recorded footage. This gap in the timeline was unsettling. Sudiksha was known for being cautious, and it seemed highly unlikely that she would have simply disappeared without leaving some trace. But there were no clues. She wasn't seen walking back to the resort, and none of the other guests had reported seeing her. The mystery deepened further when authorities discovered that the area where Sudiksha's belongings were found was actually an area that was frequently trafficked by other guests. If she had been in that spot, wouldn't someone have noticed her? Or worse, had someone seen something that they hadn't shared yet? 4. The social media investigation. Online sleuths weigh in. In the age of digital communication, no case is ever truly without attention. The disappearance of Sudiksha Konanki caught the interest of online sleuths, armchair detectives, and social media users who began to dig into every detail of the case. Reddit threads, Twitter hashtags, and Facebook groups sprang up almost overnight, filled with theories, questions, and potential leads. Some online users believed they had cracked the case, offering up speculative theories based on little more than circumstantial evidence. One user suggested that Sudiksha may have been involved with someone on the trip who was not part of the original group, a romantic interest gone wrong. Another theory was that there was a local predator operating on the island, preying on young tourists, citing similar cases that had occurred in the region. But while the online investigation drew attention, it also raised ethical concerns. Without concrete evidence, these speculative theories only added to the confusion, sensationalizing the case in a way that did not help the investigation. However, the online community continued to offer their thoughts, connecting dots that the official investigators had yet to consider. Whether helpful or not, the public's involvement kept Sudiksha's case in the spotlight, refusing to let it fade from memory. 5. The discovery of Sudiksha's belongings. A clue or a red herring. One of the most compelling developments in the case came when Sudiksha's belongings were discovered. Her sandals and beach bag were found on a chair on the beach, perfectly placed, but completely out of place. There was no sign of Sudiksha, but her personal items that seemed so intimately connected to her, sat there as if waiting for her to return. This discovery raised more questions than answers. How had her belongings ended up on that chair? Was it a sign that she had left the beach voluntarily, or had someone else placed them there? The location of the items, as well as the lack of any other traces, fueled speculation. Some believed the placement of her things indicated a planned disappearance, while others thought it suggested a violent struggle or hurried abandonment. It became a critical piece of the investigation, one that left detectives puzzling over its significance. 6. The search for Sudiksha. Continuing the hunt for answers. As weeks turned into months, the investigation into Sudiksha Konanki's disappearance remained an open case. Investigators continued to follow leads, but nothing substantial turned up. Family members, friends, and strangers rallied to keep the case alive, posting flyers, organizing fundraisers, and spreading awareness on social media. Sudiksha's face became a symbol of hope, her disappearance a rallying cry for those searching for justice and closure. Despite the continued efforts, the trail remained cold. Each new piece of evidence seemed to lead to a dead end, and the lack of progress weighed heavily on everyone involved. Despite the passage of time, Sudiksha Konanki's disappearance remains unsolved, and her family's hope for closure continues to hang by a thread. The unanswered questions about what happened on that fateful day in 2020 continue to torment them, and the search for her, though slowing, has never truly stopped. Sudiksha was last seen in the early hours of the morning, when she left her room and walked to the beach. Her disappearance has left a gaping hole in her family's hearts, and the lack of closure has made it difficult to find peace. With no definitive evidence to support any one theory, the case continues to bewilder investigators and online sleuths alike. For her family, the pain of not knowing where Sudiksha is or what happened to her is unbearable. They cling to the hope that one day, the truth will emerge, that the missing pieces of the puzzle will come together, and they'll finally learn what happened to their beloved daughter, sister, and friend. As her case remains open, her story still holds a place in the hearts of people worldwide who are desperate for answers. Even now, her family continues to fight for justice, raising awareness and urging anyone with information to come forward. They post flyers every year on the anniversary of her disappearance, hoping someone, somewhere will finally provide the missing link in this heartbreaking mystery. The public's role in this investigation cannot be understated. If anyone has information, no matter how small it seems, it could be the clue that brings answers. Sudiksha's case has taught us the importance of vigilance and compassion when it comes to missing persons. Everyone has a responsibility to ensure the missing are not forgotten, and their stories do not fade into the background. If you have any information about Sudiksha's case or have seen anything unusual in the area around her disappearance, authorities urge you to reach out. The truth is still out there, and it's waiting for the right person to bring it to light. Sudiksha Konanki's story is far from over. With every passing day, more people join the search for answers, more eyes turn to the case, and the hope for resolution continues to burn. There is a possibility, however faint, that someone knows something that could lead to the truth. For Sudiksha, for her family, and for everyone who has ever been touched by her story, the search for justice continues.